Perfect. It is recorded now. So, okay, let's get started. First items that I added, someone asked on Slack about the status of XDS and V2. As far as I know, the status is good. We have switched to ADS. So let me put so ADS fully implemented. So we have full ADS implementation. The only thing that is still not fully switched is RDS. RDS is implemented on server side, but we chose to generate the routes in line. Basically, listeners will have the routes as a route specifier instead of RDS. We may or may not switch this to RDS depending on some testings that we want to do. We want to see how it impacts the 503. If there is any chance that there is a race condition or delays when the routes are switched. Except for this tiny detail, we have everything else has been passing the test and it seems to be working. We have some debugging interface as well that seems to be provide enough information. The decision was that in 08 we'll ship two versions of the proxy, one version of proxy that is using V1 and one version that is using V2. And users will switch at their own pace. They will not be forced to switch because we want to allow people who upgrade to not have any surprises since V2 is implementing Alpha 3 only. That's pretty much it. And since I'm talking, do you have any questions on this or sorry? Let's close this.
It's probably worth pointing out that 0.8 will be the only release where we support both APIs at once.
Yes, so V1 will still be supported.
I've been testing the gateway for this next release, and I haven't been able to get it to work in Kubernetes yet. It looks like listeners aren't being registered, and I don't know if it's a me issue or an actual configuration issue. So if someone else has got the ingress controller under the gateway working.
Yeah, so I responded in that issue, right? I mean, we have a full end-to-end test that uses an ingress and an egress gateway within Kubernetes, and like that test has been in for like a few days now.
Okay.
I mean, you can just follow the pattern that is used in that end-to-end test.
Yeah, I last night I probably tried 10 different ways last night trying to get it to add those listeners, and I think it's an issue in pilot.
Okay. Yeah, let's discuss that offline on the Slack channel. That will resolve that.
Yeah, if we want this to go for 08, isn't this kind of required to work?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I mean, let's just resolve the whether it's an error on like your configuration side or whether it's error on pilot and so on. We can just resolve it.
Okay.
Slack. But yeah, that is gonna go on 0.8 for sure.
And more and more people are going to test this in real environments. So I'm switching to testing, and I think everyone for the next weeks will do a lot of testing. So if you have any issues, I'm sure we'll experience the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably also worth pointing out that if we need to slip the 0.8 timeline a little bit to get these features in, we will. Because this is the most important thing going into 0.8. And so there's really not a lot of point shipping 0.8 without this stuff working.
Well, I appreciate that. Why sleep? We are ready.
Yeah, no. This is flexibility. This is not determinism.
Yeah, I see it's been added in Helm, but do we know if we're going to add it to the regular Kubernetes install as well?
It's an opt-in thing, I guess, the gateway.
So I don't know if that was communicated, discussed in the environments working group, but probably we should reiterate it here in case someone missed that PR. For 08, we are not going to support the old template that were, with update version script and the said stuff that we're doing in 07. We are using Helm template or Istio CTL Helm, which is doing kind of the same thing. to convert the Helm templates into a Kubernetes YAML file. So there will be no, they are not removed yet. I don't know why, but we're planning to remove the old ones, and there will be only one source of truth, and that will be the Helm templates. You don't have to use Helm. You can use Istio Helm, which has exactly the same code as Helm template. You can also use Stealer, but at least we'll have only one place, and we don't have the confusion that we had with the past about.
Okay, thanks.
So you could use a Helm template to generate the YAML, or you could alternatively using istio Helm command to generate the YAML, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Istio Helm is linking in the Helm code, the Helm template code. So it's kind of the same thing, but you don't have to install Helm. I mean, if you don't have it already or for any other reason. But it lacks some of the features. You cannot override arbitrary key value pairs.
Okay, so I have a question on testing the Envoy version 2. So we have a couple of new people on board from IBM team, and is there a single landing page to show people these are the things you need to do to testing the new feature? Because we'd be happy to help out on testing this too.
Sriram, do you know anything?
Well, what exactly about Envoy v2? I mean, the information is spread across like the Envoy repository and this. I mean, as with everything in pilot, you need to familiarize yourself with the data plane APIs that Envoy has and the architecture and the idea behind the ADS and all the other things, which would help you quickly understand how the code is. I mean, if you need help in terms of understanding the code structure within Istio, that's very easy. We can just write up a doc, or we can just give you a walkthrough. But if it's about tell us what Envoy v2 is, then that's I mean, we are not going to do any proper justice, because Javi and Co, they've actually added enough docs and so on within the data plane API repositories that I would suggest starting from there and then working your way back.
That's for people who want to contribute code, but for people who want to test, besides set the environment variable, we don't really have much right now.
Right. Do we have a single landing page to say this build non-working, not working? These are the things you have to turn it on to make sure you're testing on the new Envoy version 2. That's what I was looking for. So people can at least get play with it before they even look at the code.
On that front, we should just simply start by migrating all the book info tests to using V1 Alpha 3, because then it just becomes people can just simply start with the book info test itself, and then they play around with it and see what is missing right now in order to get the auth and mixer.
So then probably what most people should care about is, hey, I've got Istio, I'm using V1 Alpha 1, how do I make the transition to the new API?
Right, exactly. How do I actually try the new things? Because I have an example myself now. I keep hearing my team member at IBM reporting, they tried this, they couldn't get it working. It's what is the single thing people can be referring to so they know what to do and they are aware of the issue. If there's a given issue that's known by everybody already.
I would say that Monday is the time when I was planning to start looking at the docs, because they are trying to cut the release soon. So today, tomorrow, and the weekend, we need to make sure that we have all the code in. So documentation was not really the top priority.
Yeah, I mean, that's
when
fair
the code
point.
was still landing hot in. But it's definitely we need a lot of documentation. We have a bit of doc on how to debug, which may be a bit out of date because people have changed the code. There is a README file in the XDS directory, but again, yes, everyone will need to test and to document and to go over the steps. There is no.
So how to debug? Can you send the doc? Maybe link it.
It is checked in. It's a README file in the XDS directory.
In Pilot.
In Pilot, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on this subject?
Yeah, I had a quick question about the V2 API. Any chance that the webhook also has been migrated to V2?
No.
Little chance.
The gRPC webhook is not done, but what we've added so far is is equivalent a plugin framework that you can actually like just simply import Pilot as a Go library and then simply add your custom filters and compile your own version of Pilot binary, which just has like 95% of what we ship plus your additional add-ons, if you will. And that is one way by which you can add additional filters to Envoy or tweak things that we are actually like generating. And we'll also look into adding the webhook thing. And
no,
yeah.
sure. Thanks, Sriram. Any links to it that you want to drop in the chat, and I can follow up on that one? Thanks.
Yeah, I can point to
V1 Alpha 3. So as a bit of background here, the real problem with the webhook is that in the past, the webhook got a JSON and returned a JSON, and everything was fine. The proto, even if we convert it to JSON, you will get something with structs that is, almost impossible to read and to modify. We could do it, but I don't think anyone will benefit from it at this point.
We could do gRPC webhooks, right?
We could do gRPC webhook where you pass a proto, the real proto, but again, the proto contains structs. So all the interesting stuff is inside structs, which in proto is also pretty hard to iterate and to modify. If it wasn't for the struct thing and also opaque, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if anyone finds it useful, it's relatively easy to add it. It's just a matter of
I can just give people that option that like they have the the appetite to go through the entire proto thing and add things. I mean, sure, but that's the least overhead way of exposing an external interface of the Pilot, right?
Yeah.
And they can. It's painful, that's for sure, and
it's on the borderline of evil. I mean, I have headaches whenever I look at the structure. But anyway, if anyone wants to be in touch, I think we can get it in. It's just not a priority, I think, at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, let's.
Coming back to that, so we obviously know of people who are using the Lua stuff. If 0.8 is the only release that people can go through to do their V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 3 upgrade, we kind of have to have some story in place for those people.
We have a tool that there are some rough edges in the tool, and that's probably something that Lynn said there are a few people from IBM that they could actually help with. So we have a tool that would within IstioCTL, it's sort of a plugin.
No, forget that, right? We have people running in production. They're going to do partial migrations, right? Where they're going to cover namespace by namespace, but they still want the Lua script stuff to keep working. They can't just do a whole fleet cutover. And even if they did, if they can't get the Lua script stuff injected, it's not going to work.
The Lua script? Where does Lua script come in?
No, they're using the old webhook to inject Lua.
Oh, that. Oh. So, I mean, there is a PR that I actually sent out, which sort of like, enables, a first-class support for Lua with our code itself. And that plus the, there is another thing that I'm working with Chris from Lyft to have per route filter configuration. When those two things land, we should technically be able to specify Lua scripts within the virtual service itself.
Okay.
Or basically like push that as an external configuration that people can stick it in. So
ETA.
ETA for the PR and Envoy is probably end of this week or mid next week. But then that once that PR lands, then it's very simple as a direct approach. If you want to simply enable Lua script, then it's very, very simple because it's just adding an extra proto field within virtual service and sticking that in as a Lua filter. But if you wanted a little bit more of an extensible approach, if you will, then there's a PR. I mean, it's just a work in progress, but we could take a look at that and then see how that helps.
So since
I think that's the only one that's I know is widely used in webhooks. So if we have support for that, I think we're good.
And again, we can just do a first-class support for Lua, which just makes it easy.
But yes, just to add context here, I think you guys already know it also probably that we also used the webhook to enable the ODZ filter. So I mean, we are looking for ways how to extend that once the move to V2 API is done. So any suggestions on how to do that and how we can help?
Yeah, for that, I think the plugin filter is probably a much, the plugin interface is probably a much easier way for you guys. The Lua filter is much more of a end user thing where, like, people like Nick, they want to use a Lua filter for temporary thing, and so for them it's a low touch thing. But whereas you, as you're adding additional stuff, I would say the plugin one is probably a much easier one for the moment.
Are you talking about the OZ filters that we have in proxy right now? I mean, the official one? Or do you have a custom one?
One.
It's part of Envoy, so yeah, that one. We want to enable that.
Oh, so is that already part of Envoy?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, then I guess, then I think that that I have in Istio API, Lewis, I mean, the plugin interface, that would actually help people enable arbitrary Envoy filters. But I should look at it.
So we should consider adding support, I mean, some annotation or some escape hatch for other Envoy filters.
That's what I'm referring to. There's a PR that I have in API that actually allows people to configure arbitrary filters as just blobs of photo thingies that they just simply take and stick it in. And
okay, that will solve the problem, I think. And this is targeted for 08 and worst case scenario to be 081. I mean, it's still in the LTS timeframe. Okay, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Sure.
Okay, sorry, next topic. Just a quick update on mesh expansion with the work on multi-cluster. We are going to make a small change to mesh expansion to use an Envoy proxy instead of creating 3 or 4 load balancers. Should not be a major or controversial issue, just for your info. So that's it, nothing more. Concerns? Okay, next topic, destination rules versus virtual services.
Yeah, this was something I asked a question in the proxy channel a couple days ago, and it's really like laying out why certain functionality exists in the route rule in virtual services for the new route rules, and which ones go in destination services. It seems like there's no real clear line on which functionality should go. So talking about specifically around retries or percentage-based routing, those are currently in virtual services, but it seems like maybe they're more of a better fit for destination rules, because destination rules is handling I'm trying to think of what it's called, the back off retries and stuff, or some other functionality.
So the thing with the retries is that it's inherently tied. I mean, okay, so that is one example which I can tackle. Is there anything else that you have?
Well, it's realistically, explaining, I'm trying to, this is me trying to explain to our users when to use one and when the other one's needed. And it's not really clear why one versus the other. It's oh, retries, that sounds like it should be a part of the health stuff in destination rules. I'm trying to think about where you can turn off requests to backends if they throw so many 500s. I can't remember the name for it. But it seems like retries are part of that same kind of health balancing, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I think you and I had a discussion about whether retries should move into destination rule.
Yeah, I think it's partly, well, I guess, yeah, right. I mean, it's partly tied to the Envoy semantics of retries have some relation to the per route setting, and whether they retry 503s versus 404s, the item put in versus non-item put in stuff. The outlier is essentially dealing with just plain pure, the load balancing, maintain the health of the load balancing cluster. But I would certainly like to see that retry stuff move into a cluster level stuff, which just makes things easier to read. But I think that would actually help, where we actually explain here is the demarcation from X to Y, and here is so we are going to write a doc article within Istio which actually explains these are the components of the new v1 alpha 3, and this is how, like, we are structuring it, and this is how you can reason about it. That will probably give a, it's under construction, so once we have finished it, that'll probably give you some ideas, like,
Yeah, I think it'd be good to lay out. I think the most thing is communication, and outlier detection was the one I was thinking of. But it seems like, yeah, Y is 1 and 1 versus the other, and as long as I think as we communicate that, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit odd. Istio is trying to be a bit more principled about saying that, there are traffic properties that occur post-routing versus pre-routing, or at routing time, and retry is, generally speaking, a post-routing behavior, and so should go into destination rule, even though Envoy itself has it in its routing rule. Istio could, in theory, just move it into dest rule and infer that back up into the Envoy routing rule when we serve ADF.
I guess we could do that, and we did that earlier, I guess.
Yeah, we've done it before.
We did it before, and I think there it was a problem of like multiple destination rules applying to the same virtual service, but I think this one is potentially easier.
Yeah, and I'm not really advocating for either way. I think as long as it's clear communication on, why, what is done this way is probably okay.
But I think one way to think about it is that if you want to apply it per route, like you have two different two different paths in the virtual host, and they need to have different retry intervals, then probably the virtual service is the right place. If it's something that is global, meaning that anything going to that cluster will have that particular retry, then probably it will be a destination rule. I mean, if you put it in destination rule, you lose the ability to do routes.
Okay.
And I don't know, and right now, constantly tell people, if you want to create variance in the behavior, just go create a new subset and refer to it in your route, right? So it's not that high a bar.
It is possible, but it's not trivial to, if you have a lot of, I mean, there is a cost of creating those subsets in terms of.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it creates it actually creates a new Envoy cluster.
Exactly.
The primary downside here right now is that Envoy models, well, we pay a resource cost because of the creation of the cluster. And because we want clusters to have meaningful names, we can't go and share them by mangling the name. Yeah,
and for user perspective, it may be less intuitive to create clusters just to tune retry or some parameter. Anyway.
On the other hand, retry policy is probably owned by the service producer, right? So it is more tied to the destination. And it isn't a routing behavior, right? But yeah, we might just have to live with the semantic inconsistency and document it. But other things like outlier detection, I mean, they seem even more clearly part of destination rule. Right?
Yep, like I said, I think as long as the communication around, around why and which ones, I think that'll be helpful. And I think, like, as you explained, the per route versus cluster wide, I think is a really good way of explaining it too.
Okay. Sure. Another thing we could look at is, are there ways to improve how we model subset so that we can still share the cluster and keep it the name while dealing with these types of semantic issues?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything we're going to target for 0.8 though. So
yeah.
Well, the big question is if any changes can be made in a backward compatible way, because hopefully we'll not make any more breakages after 0.8.
Yeah, I mean, we can always add, right?
Adding, yeah.
And then just soft deprecate the virtual server.
Yeah. Okay. Next topic.
Okay, that question is from me. I would like to try to understand if am I seeing this problem the right way. My question is if we should be updating the host header, because on my test, at least, what I'm seeing that when you call via ingress, you're using the host header as the one that is reaching ingress to inside of the mesh, and I'm trying to create some policies based on the host header. And I was checking the specification seems to be that when you have a proxy in the middle, the proxy should point to the internal address of the service trying to reach. So my question here is if we see concerns of updating this header, and if this is an issue, should we open that issue or something? So that's basically the question I have around that.
So I'm not sure how to parse that particular. My understanding was the opposite, that proxies need to preserve the host header, not to modify the host header. I'm not aware of any proxy servers that is changing.
Yeah, so that's my question to see if, like, my original understanding was that, and I was checking some specs, and I highlighted what I saw in that version of the spec, and the newer version that I link in the second comment. That seems to point that we that the prox expect to be rewriting that. So I'm a little bit confused on that. That's my first question. If are we supposed to be rewriting that or not? And if not,
I worked on proxy for a while, and my interpretation was that proxy should not change it because the way to identify the resource is the original client requested host name.
Yes. Sorry.
So it's not, Cesar, what behavior are you seeing? Are you seeing that the host header is getting changed, or is
no, it's untouched. Like the way I see, like everything I send to the ingress is like I receive as the destination as the ingress, and like what I was trying to do is to play with some policies that I know the destination is a given resource, and try to use the host for something else. And what I saw that if the request is coming from the ingress, I receive the ingress information. If it's coming from the mesh, I have the right like I have the proper serves inside of the mesh that I'm trying to reach. Because basically anything I put in the curl is what appears in the host. And as got untouched, it'll be pointing to the most external thing I'm trying to call. Yeah.
Ingress cannot headers. You can add optional headers on top of that if you want to identify. And I think the API already supports that.
If you want to know that something came through ingress, you probably want to look at something like X-forwarded for.
Yeah, no, so my goal was try to use the host information for understand where I should be going, but that's the point I got stuck trying to see if is this an issue or not. So yeah, so the position that we should not be touching that, right? That's not a bug. That's expected not to be touching.
Yeah, it's okay. But if ingress should be appropriately setting X-forwarded for, so that you can rely on the state of X-forwarded for to know that it has gone through proxy hops.
So can you repeat this part? Sorry.
Let me put it in the...
So you know the X-forwarded for header? I can actually, let me...
That's okay. The headers for the distribute tracing, like X forward ID.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
Request ID.
Yeah, someone.
So that is based on the IP of inside of the mesh, right?
Right.
Okay, I can trust on that. Okay.
And the routing rules can specify additional headers, so you can write rules and put arbitrary headers, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I saw this X forward header and I was unsure if I could trust on that or not. Okay, I use that.
Yeah. No. That's what you should rely on.
Okay. Thanks.
And if you want to know whether a request is internal or external, because it's a common problem that you could have a client inside the mesh pretend that it was external, or vice versa. There's the X Envoy internal header, and that mimics something that we do internally at Google, which is simply just a true-false statement about whether the request came in through an ingress.
Okay, so if it's
a simpler way, it's just easier to parse than looking at X-forwarded for.
Okay.
And forward for is a separate. It's a whole path, not only one.
Yeah, X404 is just a list of IPs.
Yeah.
If you know the IPs, then yes, you can validate that one of them is your ingress. But it's simpler to just look at that boundary.
So if it's connected to the ingress, like product page, then X Envoy external address would be the address, IP address of your ingress, Istio ingress?
Yeah. X404 will include the address of the ingress, yes. I think X Envoy internal is Boolean, not...
Yeah, there's also X Envoy external address, which is the IP address the ingress was presented on.
Okay.
Which
Cool.
should be the same as the X404 IP address. But X404 could be multiple, right?
Yeah, I have two in my headers now. So X402, I have two IP, and the X Envoy external address is only one IP, which I think is still ingress IP.
Okay, I'll do a small to-do to add more documentation next week and with all those headers, and because there are a few others that are used for authentication, the JOT token, and probably needs the documentation.
Yeah, I think our headers are very confusing because today I was trying to do the tracing stuff. Like we recommended like multiple headers for trace spam, but I captured the headers. I only have like 3 or 4 headers in the documentation, but not everything in our documentation that's even available for me to propagate headers.
Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. It's confusing, I agree.
Yeah, it's very confusing because you would expect those headers to be there, and as an application developer, you would need to make sure all the headers are propagated. But I've only seen like 3 out of the 7 or 8 headers in my trace.
Yeah, we clearly need some integration testing to make sure that these headers are correctly being set, and also sanitized in the case of egress, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We do have integration test as far as I know for the tracing.
Yeah,
very convoluted one, but we do.
Well, that's separate. Tracing is separate from setting the headers, though, right? There are a lot of headers that Envoy can set.
Yes. We test one particular combination that is used by Zipkin.
Yeah, but that's like Zipkin won't care about X Envoy internal or any of that stuff, right? Whereas, you know, in the case of egress, if we were setting those headers, that might actually be leaking privileged information.
Oh yeah, in particular security tests for this whole X Envoy external and forward for it. I mean, I've seen bugs.
Yeah, we should. I added a comment for Zach, so we can follow up. But we probably treat those as P1 bugs, not P0s for this release, but probably P0s for the GA.
What do you mean the test for the headers? Like, because I'm playing with data right now, so maybe I can create some stuff to play around.
So Zach is currently doing the work on the ingress and egress gateways. As part of shipping that feature, it should test that those headers are being set.
Okay.
Right, where on ingress, we should set X Envoy internal, whereas on egress, we should probably sanitize any internal headers to make sure that they're not being propagated out of the mesh.
Yeah.
We don't set that today. I mean, yeah, so that part it's a to-do.
Yeah.
And in particular, to verify that any X404 that comes from the internet is filtered out by Envoy. Because
there's a whole, like, we shouldn't just accept the other ones that come in from ingress and append to them. That would be very dangerous.
Yep. Yeah, I'll add that actually. That part.
Okay, that's cool. If you guys have a few minutes, I'd like to discuss mesh expansion. I know, Costin, you gave a briefly update, which it doesn't occur to me. So this is actually an interesting move then. So are you saying we are going to not require people to have ILB in their Kubernetes cluster, and then they could use the new Envoy-based gateway to do mesh expansion?
Not really. What I said is that instead of creating 5 ILBs, we will only create 1. In 0.2, when we shipped, we had 1 load balancer for Mixer, 1 load balancer for Pilot, 1 for the CA, and 1 for DNS. Because Mixer split into 2 components, it would mean to add yet another load balancer, and instead of that, we just create one single load balancer that is running Envoy, and it's forwarding to the proper service. It's just reducing the number of IPs that need to be allocated and set in DNS and all these overheads that user will have to go through.
Okay, and this single ILB, is that a Google Cloud specific thing, or is that the Kubernetes load balancer service type?
It's a generic, many clouds support internal load balancers. It just means that it's an IP address that doesn't change.
Okay, okay, yeah, we do have that support. I just want to make sure. So it's when you set the service type as load balancer and it's bounded to IP that's private to your cloud, right?
Yeah,
but it's a static IP.
Yes, it's a static IP because the pilot pod can move and can change. You don't have a static IP for a pilot. It can also be an external load balancer. It can be a regular load balancer. It's just a way to reach pilot with a known name, basically, with a known IP address.
Okay, okay, and that's great.
I don't know if you follow the security changes, but pilot, mixer, CA also have DNS certificates now. Signed by Istio CA, and external or internal clients can connect using the certificates and verify to the regular DNS certificates. Okay,
so that's when you turn the Istio control plane to run on Istio security, right? To mutual TLS, all the services are mutual TLS. Okay.
Yes, it's just a simplification for multi-cluster and for mesh expansion. It's just.
Yeah, it's definitely a simpler simplification. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do some testing in this area on our cloud too, because I think it sounds promising for us too.
Okay, other topics. We still have 20 minutes.
No, I'm okay. I just ask it to confirm if I can state that, so we can put in the minutes to formalize that. We don't touch there.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean to say, not expected to be touched by design.
The host header, if they yeah, sorry. It's just to formalize, like, we don't change that and we don't plan to change that. So
that's for IETF to clarify. That's my understanding of the standard. But probably the proper form will be IETF to answer this question outrightly.
I think it's pretty clear, right? I mean, if we didn't propagate the host header, I don't think I've seen many systems where they didn't propagate the host header, either using the host header or by copying it into some other header. Yeah. As far as I know, Envoy has other standard headers for other information that means that you don't have to repurpose the host header.
So let's say unless we find any proxy server, any mainstream proxy server that is modifying the header, we'll assume that we interpret the standard properly and we are not modifying it. Right. Does it sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, Liam, are you still there?
I'm sorry, who are you asking for?
Liam, because it seemed like he was actually working with the new API. I was going to ask him for his qualitative impression of the API. I feel like the new API is better than the old one.
Yeah, so I've just been playing around with it. I haven't got too much working because mostly through my own error. But yeah, the code's much easier to understand, I think, or I seem to be picking up quicker. I don't know if that's because I'm more used to the code base now. But I'll have a play around this weekend, get some debugging stuff into Istio CTL, and then see how I like it after I've had to write a lot of code against it.
Okay, that's fair.
The zone, availability zone, there is a bug that, where, did anyone look at it, or is anyone doing additional testing on the AZ stuff? I saw that you did a patch to fetch it over HTTPS, so things are improving. But
yes, I don't know if Chris wants to speak about this, but we need some Envoy-based changes. There's some discussion in a chat. I think it's either an issue or something in Istio users, I guess. But exactly what we need to do.
no, but after your change to do HTTPS, I mean the one where you pull over HTTPS and you do TLS in pilot, did you do an end-to-end test and everything is looking okay?
So I know it's not working because we need. This is the thing we need to change in Envoy. So there was the local cluster name in V1 Envoy needed to be in the CDS response. We're not going to bother doing the CDS stuff for V1, so we're going straight to V2. And in V2, it's static and in the bootstrap, which I don't think really works with our cluster naming. So this is what we've got kind of an ongoing discussion with Matt Klein about it, about how we're going to solve the problem. But I've kind of given this to Chris to look at because he's looking at the Envoy stuff. So I don't know if he can update on that stuff.
Could you put some notes there so we have links? I'm not sure if I got everything you said on what is missing. And I don't think we care about V1 too much at this point.
And what are you saying is that you mean the AZ stuff is actually a boot time configuration for Envoy. You cannot dynamically configure it in Envoy no matter what you do, whether it's in the boot. It is essentially in a configuration file or a command line option, and we will have to restart Envoy and in order to update the local AZ. So the only option is either we use the pilot agent to go fetch the AZ and then start Envoy, which means there is a period of no availability until Envoy starts, or we do or we do what we're doing today, which is that we start Envoy without any AZ information, and then we fetch the AZ information, and then we restart Envoy.
There's some extra stuff around the local cluster name. So yeah, like I said, the local cluster name moved from the CDS response to a bootstrap option.
So
is that what we're doing?
I have no problem with what we are doing. We can even do fetch availability zone from pilot. I mean, do a check-in or initial request to pilot and then start Envoy. I have no problem with that. My question was if with the AZ fetching from pilot, if we are okay. I mean, if we have everything we need in V2. I mean, we have end-to-end test or some testing, or we are confident that this feature is working somehow.
Yeah. We need to look at exactly how we're going to do it. I genuinely don't have any idea how we're going to test how a request stays within a specific zone.
I mean, manual testing is fine. It's one of the features that is pretty tricky to test. I mean, I'm trying to other test that AZ is fetched fine, and that's probably going to be okay. But I want to test the EDS response to make sure, because EDS is also related. I mean, it needs to do some AZ related grouping.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure how we can validate this.
You should be able to create an external service with an AZ label, right, for an endpoint. That would be a way to test.
Yeah, we can try that as well. I was thinking to just start two different clusters and test multi-cluster at the same time, but yeah.
We don't parse the AZ label from the external service. I mean, today the only way to obtain AZ is on the platform registry, but we should probably set up an AZ label within the external service so that we can actually.
That's going to be pretty important, I think. So.
Yeah,
I know.
Costin, you mentioned that you're okay with the idea. Sorry, forgive the dogs. With fetching the AZ from pilot at Envoy startup time, but we want to be very careful about increasing the latency of Envoy startup.
Yeah, that's what I was saying actually. It essentially increases. I mean, the only way to do this is to have a dynamic operation in Envoy to update its own AZ. But Matt feels that that's just sort of going to convolute the code. These are boot time configurations that you need to have. So option one is we just do what we're doing today, which is we start Envoy and then we restart Envoy once we have all the AZ information.
Oh my God.
But in practical terms, it's a very one round trip, and it should be a very fast operation. And getting AZ from pilot is really not that expensive.
So why does it not work? Why can't we use the injector?
So we only know the AZ after the pod has been scheduled on a node injector. So one option is to put back that Kubernetes client into pilot agent, and that client this is what that client used to do. It used to like look up the local, the AZ from the Kubernetes downward API, whatever that API it is, and get the AZ, and then it would start Envoy. But in this case, it had no dependency per se on pilot. It just simply depended on the Kube API and to fetch that information. But that just increases the size of the sidecar by the runtime size by 50 MB additional. Because the client is huge.
It's not that problem. The problem is that it requires authentication and RBAC and all this stuff for the sidecar, and it has other implication. And I don't think round trip to Kubernetes.
As any pod should actually be able to talk to the Kubernetes API server, and so that.
Not necessarily. It can be turned off, and you may restrict how much it is, and it's more complexity. But it doesn't matter. A round trip to Kube API server or round trip to pilot is kind of the same thing. There is no. It may be even faster to do a round trip to pilot, and with this occasion to also get additional data. The reason I want to do it is because it's an opportunity to get additional info and additional to AZ, so pilot can control other startup time options like logging or whatever else pilot may want to control. Since now we have the metadata that we pass with a node in ADS. Okay, we can take it offline. I don't want to spend too much time. It's just something I want people to be aware of and to aware of.
Yeah, we should probably bring it up with the Kubernetes folks because it's a lot of overhead.
Yeah, they refused to expose that as an environment variable within the pod, which was a pain actually.
Yeah. Yeah, Cost and I generally agree, right? Absent anything else, talking to pilot is probably the best option, but we should still probably harass the Kubernetes folks about trying to do something better.
I think their answer might be that because an AZ isn't really associated with a pod, it's associated with a node. So it's kind of, I can see an argument against it, but we'll see what they say.
And
yes. I was just going to say Kubernetes, the downward API, I think it allows you from a pod to figure out which, it doesn't allow you from a pod to figure out which node you are on. That would be a nice addition if we can have it.
So, be on a node, right? Go look at Azure, right? Or you're on a vast fake node.
Yeah. And we discussed it a few times on the mailing list on reviews. Technically, if you know when you inject, if you have a different injector for each cluster, you could inject the AZ, using the webhook or using whatever CI/CD tools you are using. So it is possible to.
Provided you have a cluster per AZ, right?
There are many clusters that don't support the annotation anyway. That's not a standard feature. So
you have a cluster per AZ per cluster, then
yes.
This problem is not an issue at all because
yes.
then we can add it to the injector and that we are done with it. But this is only for you have Kubernetes cluster spanning multiple availability zones, and you need to know where it is and so on. But the other way is very easy. That's just.
I know. What I was saying is that in many cases can be covered with one solution. And yes, if you have a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster that spans multiple zones, it will be a bit slower startup. That's the only cost.
So what's more common? A cluster that spans many zones or a cluster per zone?
You have to tell us. What does GKE do? It's one per AZ, I guess.
One per AZ.
I think AWS also has one per AZ.
Yeah.
Correctly. I think though the IBM one is like a cluster spans multiple AZs. But they are also moving to a one per AZ model, if I recall correctly. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, IBM's leaning towards multi-master. So you have multi-master and then multiple nodes in different AZs in a single cluster.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a fixed CIDR range for each AZ?
This is a discussion actually we were having the other day. Lynn's probably the person to answer this question.
Right, because that's something you typically see, right? If you were bridging multiple networks, each zone would tend to have its own IP range.
Actually, that's a very good point. Oh, sorry. That the CIDR range could also be used to detect the node.
Yeah, so if we just had, a cluster level setting with the injector and then the ability to override for specific IP ranges, I think that would probably get people 90% of the way there. They might have to specify a bunch of them, but that would still work with the injector.
That's a very good action item too, because that will solve the problems much cleanly. It will not make me happy because I was planning to piggyback on this request to get other settings for pilot for the sidecar, but it's technically it's a better solution.
So the other settings you were hoping to get, Costin, what were they?
Sorry?
What were the other settings you were hoping to get in that call?
IP tables, tuning, how to use, to use a new, there is a PR floating about alternative ways to do capture, logging level, all kind of stuff. I can find many things to put there.
Okay, so maybe what we should try and do is kind of schematize that default config, have the injector set it, but the ability to Envoy to fetch it dynamically, or sorry, the pilot agent to fetch it dynamically. And if pilot's down, Envoy could still come up with the default ones from the injector.
Yeah.
So it's effectively a merge with override, right?
Yep, sounds like a good idea. So to do setting to HAZ and okay.
So the discussion seemed to move forward, but just from the downward API, it looks like you get the node name and the node IP. Seems to be available. So
yeah,
we need the node annotation.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, we managed to fill the hour.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.